Pop songs are getting shorter. I'm probably not the first person to point this out to you. In the 2024 Year in Music report by Chartmetric, the average Spotify charting song was only about 3 minutes long, an average that's down 15 seconds from the previous year and 30 seconds shorter than in 2019. Admittedly, it's a bit of a Spider's George situation, with a few very notable, very short songs pulling down an average that still does include some 4 and even 5-minute songs. Multiple articles that I've read on the subject have mentioned Lil Yachty's song Poland from 2022, which is only 83 seconds long but still took the pop world by storm. The takeaway, in my opinion, isn't necessarily that artists are, en masse, going out of their way to write very short songs to cash in on short internet-age attention spans, though I'm sure that is happening here and there. Instead, I'd say that music audiences are more forgiving these days of a song being very short and simple, as opposed to how the attitudes would have been in, say, the 1990s. And folks can and will argue about what that means about our brains that we're so easily entertained by songs that, for example, lack a bridge section, or only use the same 3 chords throughout. But the bottom line is that it is happening. People are indeed often satisfied by that little, so long as it's catchy. And of course, some very short songs can still fit a fair amount of complexity into them. All the articles that I've read about this stuff have focused on English language music, and the American pop sphere in particular, but you can kind of see this trend in the vocalsynth world too. There's a YouTube channel called Vocastats who puts out a monthly video charting the most viewed vocalsynth songs on YouTube, and there's no shortage of bite-sized ballads each month. 2024 saw the mega hit Mesmerizer clock in at under 3 minutes, while some other big songs from last year like Override and Tetris are even shorter. But for the last few years, the undisputed king of Vocaloid songs under 150 seconds, pun intended, is Kanaria. Kanaria was born on May 30th, 2002, and finding out that he's only barely older than my youngest sibling frankly made my knees hurt. There's not a whole lot of public information about his life before debuting as a vocalsynth musician, or generally much at all about his personal life, so our story really begins shortly before his 18th birthday. On May 10th, 2020, Kanaria made his debut with the song Hyakisai, or 100 Demon Festival, which is still one of my personal favorites from him, so you get to hear me yap about it a bit. The title is a reference to a motif in Japanese folklore called the Hyaki Yagyo, or the Night Parade of 100 Demons. There are various legends, but essentially, it's the idea of a massive crowd of supernatural creatures coming out of the shadows to march through the streets of the real world. Sometimes it's an orderly procession, and sometimes it's more of a chaotic rush, more akin to a riot. Sticking with that theme, Kanaria's song incorporates some traditional Japanese instruments and rhythms to an otherwise electronic track. Katsuya Emika, writing for Ticket Jam, compared the song to a Bon Orori dance, which is traditional to the Japanese Buddhist festival of Obon, in which families reunite and visit places like ancestral grave sites. The lyrics similarly mix traditional motifs with more modern songwriting tropes. Miku takes the place of the spurned heroine, crying out to someone she loves who left her behind in, quote, the boiling hot rubble. It's unclear how literally the demonic motifs ought to be taken, but regardless, Miku takes the role of the parade leader, rallying all of the wretched and unloved souls to march with her like the frightful creatures of the Hyaki Yagyo. The original Miku version is great, but I'm also very partial to a cover by singer CLA. She's got an impressive amount of power on the song's high notes, which really lends to the desperate feeling of the song. Also, at a whopping 3 minutes and 13 seconds, it's the longest song on Kanaria's channel. But of course, Hyakisai was only Kanaria's first published song, not necessarily his first hit. Things really kicked off for him a few months later when he released King with Gumi English on August 2nd, 2020. You heard me right when I said Gumi English. Kanaria prefers to use that voice bank for reasons I haven't really been able to pin down besides just giving a blanket statement of, guess he just likes the sound. He definitely does do a good job of coaxing Japanese out of the voice bank, at least to my ears, and it lends an interesting sort of over-enunciated quality that his Miku songs don't have. Regardless of why he chooses that particular version of Gumi to work with, however, people definitely liked it. They really liked it, in fact. The video, which is just 2 minutes and 15 seconds long and features illustrations by the artist No, garnered over 1 million views within 2 months of its release. Hyakisai had gotten people's initial attention, enough to act as a springboard for his next song, but King was more like being shot out of a cannon. As of recording, it has over 94 million views on YouTube, making it Gumi's most viewed Japanese song and the 7th most viewed vocalsynth song overall, at least if we stick only to the view counts on official uploads. We've all heard of the Billboard Hot 100 music charts, but Billboard Japan created a subcategory for top user-generated songs. This category charts views on sites like YouTube, taking things like covers and viral dances into account. And, because of some lucky timing, this category was only instituted in December of 2020, King got to be the very first #1 on this chart, fueled in no small part by all of its covers. Now, I've said before that I am skeptical of the idea that a short runtime is in itself something that helps a song go viral, but it's definitely easier to put together a quick cover of a song that has less in it to sing. King had plenty of appeal on its own, but when covering it became something of a viral trend among utaite singers and VTubers, each new rendition broadened the song's reach. Kizuna Ai brought the song to her millions of followers, and so did various members of the Hololive VTuber collective. Mori Calliope and Gaur Gura duetted on an arrangement that also featured what I will charitably call a rap section, and my longtime fave Raun also lent her powerful vocals to a cover. The song's bizarre lyrics proved an appealing challenge for trans lyricists as well, with English renditions by artists like Will Stetson, Trickle, and an electro swing arrangement by the Musical Ghosts and Kurainu. I've also found covers in a huge variety of other languages, including German, Spanish, Russian, Korean, and quite a few really excellent Thai covers. The material that these translators had to work with, however, meant that there have been quite a few different takes on the song's meaning. On the one hand, there could be very little meaning at all. To quote Katsuya Emika again, it's a dark song with an absurd string of words, but the lyrics have a pleasant rhyme that makes it addictive. On the other hand, there are some fairly concrete images to latch onto. Another writer, Murakami Reina, noted that the lyrics evoked, quote, the execution of a king, while Machioka Amu went so far as to specifically characterize the song as an interpretation of the downfall of Louis XVI of France, from the point of view of his executioner Charles-Henri Sanson. Regardless of what the song is actually getting at, if anything, the iconic shout of left side, right side in the chorus will get just about anyone hooked. And, if that weren't enough, there's also the matter of that artwork by No that I mentioned, which I think was the final key to King's popularity among cover artists. The grayscale and red video depicts a character who looks vaguely like Gumi, decked out in a fur-trimmed cape and holding a crown, looking smugly down from atop a throne with one finger drawing their lip up to expose fangs. It's simple, eye-catching, and makes for an easily recognizable template for anybody who wants to swap in their persona to make the video their own. I mean, it's not unusual for folks to draw or commission personalized art for covers of vocalsynth songs, but I feel like King covers in particular are really likely to get this treatment. And who can blame them when it's so fun to get to put yourself into the role of this deliciously self-assured bastard in the video? King launched Kanaria headfirst into vocalsynth superstardom, which helped him to land a very high-profile creative partner to arrange his next composition, Hitori Yurari. Marutu, who at this point in 2020 was probably best known for his song Mind Brand, had his name right in the video title, but you can immediately recognize his style in the song regardless. His version is the only one that's got a proper YouTube release with an illustrated video, but Kanaria's original arrangement was also released on his first album, King, which came out towards the end of 2020. Hitori Yurari was followed by Envy Baby with Gumi in February of 2021. Structurally, it's a very similar song to King, and Kanaria would actually go on to release a mashup of the two songs later that year. In spite of, or because of that similarity, Envy Baby couldn't quite clear the admittedly extremely high bar of matching King's runaway popularity. But it was still a hit in its own right, with 36 million views as of recording. It also followed a similar trend of countless cover artists releasing their own takes, complete with personalized variations on the video artwork. This one seems to be very popular among English artists, which might be spurred by the rather mangled English lines within the song, if you don't mind me speculating. It does open up with the line, "Hey, I want a people save." Listen, love the song to bits, doesn't mean that bit specifically doesn't drive me a little nuts. Almost all of Kanaria's vocalsynth songs have featured Gumi and or Miku, but one notable exception was when he was tapped to create a demo song for a new voice bank. Tokyo 6 Entertainment and AH Software's Koharu Rika for Synthesizer V. Mira is a wonderfully creepy little tune that serves as an excellent showcase of Rika's vocal stylings, and it's one of the few Kanaria songs that I do genuinely wish was longer. Kanaria songs generally can be broken down into an intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and then you repeat that, with the melody of the intro being used as an instrumental break. This is the format that was used for King, Envy Baby, Mira, and several of his subsequent songs like I and An Unaware Drunk. For the most part, this works really well for him, in part because his high tempo in his songs let him fit so many different little melodies into very short runtimes. However, and I'll stress that this is just my opinion, Mira slows things down a little, and I personally think it really could have made an excellent 3+ minute song with a good bridge section. One of Kanaria's songs that does break his standard format at least a little bit, however, is one that he wrote for the singer Otto's debut album Kyogen. Domestic to Violence didn't get a single release, so it's relatively unknown by both Otto's standards and Kanaria's, but it's a solid track that takes full advantage of the fact that Otto's voice can be way more aggressive than Gumi or Miku ever could. Moving on, Kanaria's next release returned to form with the aforementioned I on July 25th, 2021. Another Gumi English, not English song. I think this one actually really takes advantage of having Gumi's extra English phonemes, because there's a lot of L words thrown in there. Lie and life and lindo. That last one could mean a lot of different things, he's never specified, but it's often assumed to be a word found in Spanish and Portuguese that can be translated variously as beautiful or nice. However, given the song's vaguely Eastern European vampire motif, I wonder if it might also be a reference to the Croatian lindo dance. In this dance, a leader will shout instructions to the paired dancers, which also fits, in an ironic sort of way, with the song's themes of control and manipulation. Again, just speculation on my part, but I think it could be cool. Kanaria's next song was his first duet between Miku and Gumi, Identity, and the story behind that one brings me back to something I've been circling around a little bit. Kanaria's songs, being as short as they are, work super well for the rhythm game Project Sekai. The songs featured in that game are generally cut down to about 2 minutes, give or take maybe 15 seconds, but Kanaria's songs can feature in their entirety, and have several times. First, Wonderland's Showtime covered King, with results that seem to divide opinions. I've seen the cover included on lists that people have made of both what they consider the best and the worst covers in the game, but if nothing else, I do really like the art that they did for it. The next of Kanaria's works to feature in the game was then Identity, which they commissioned as part of their Cup Noodle promotional collaboration. Yeah, in case you didn't know, Identity is technically a song about instant noodles. Specifically, the plain flavor, though out of all the songs written for the campaign, this one is arguably the least connected to the idea of ramen. Like a lot of Kanaria's work, it seems to be more about like a toxic relationship than anything else, but it does incorporate the idea of plainness in the form of a lack of individuality. In this case, a tendency to define oneself by latching onto someone else. The Project Sekai version is also interesting for featuring Miku and one of the characters from the Night Court at 2500 group, Kanade Yoisaki. The big gimmick for this campaign was mixing up the musical units by having the characters who are siblings sing together. However, there were more flavors to promote than there are pairs of sibling characters. So, we got one big ensemble piece by Michi M featuring a Wonderland Showtime character and all of Krypton's Vocaloids, the Tokugawa Cup Noodle Prohibition, and then this song, Identity. I still remember the first time I heard this song was before I had started playing Project Sekai, so I got really confused because I had no idea who that character was stood opposite Miku in the video. It took an embarrassingly long time to clue in that yes, that's a human person, singing as a character but still a person and not some sort of new synthesizer V voice bank that I'd somehow missed the release of. Anyway, a few more Project Sekai covers of Kanaria's songs have followed. Envy Baby got a cover by Night Court at 2500, which proved popular enough to get a second cover for their 4th April Fool's event. The April Fool's songs are always exciting, since they let fans hear singers who don't normally perform together, but I did think that the lineup for Envy Baby was particularly well selected. And then, there have been 2 more covers, which are of the very next 2 songs that Kanaria released after Identity. The first was Yoidori Shirazu, or An Unaware Drunk with Gumi on May 2nd, 2022. This one's by far my favorite of his songs. He has some works where I wish that he'd made them longer because the armchair music critic in me genuinely thinks it would have made them better, but with this song, I just wish it were longer because I don't want it to end. And I'm not alone in calling An Unaware Drunk a fave. At 50 million views, it's Kanaria's second biggest hit behind King. And once again, it's been super popular among cover artists. My girl Raon gave me my favorite rendition, Niji Sanji VTuber Ena Alouette had a really cool version, and even the legendary Utaite Mafu Mafu got in on the game with his rendition. The Project Sekai version, meanwhile, was performed by Vivid Bad Squad with Meiko standing in for Gumi. Meiko, unfortunately, often sounds pretty rough in Project Sekai covers, and really the tuning of the virtual singers across the board divides opinion, but that's another episode. But I think she sounds great here. Plus, with that long-time fandom in-joke about Meiko loving red wine, it's only fair that she get to sing the song about drinking way too much. Kanaria's next song, then, was Queen. It's the most recent of his works to get a Project Sekai cover, unless you count the April Fool's Envy Baby, but, it's maybe not the best of them. And listen, I'm happy to grade on a curve when it comes to human singers performing tracks written for inhuman vocals, at least part of the time, but this really could have been done better. Queen pushes Gumi's vocals to the very top of her range, higher than Kanaria even usually goes on his Miku songs, and the Project Sekai cover didn't lower the key. It was performed by the 2 female singers in Wonderland's Showtime, Emu Otori and Nene Kusanagi along with Miku. And though they have 2 of the highest ranges in the game, they are straining on this one. Project Sekai aside though, Queen is a really good track, and it's an interesting turning point for Kanaria. All of his videos up to this point besides Hyakisai had stuck to a black and white and red color palette. Queen, however, introduces a bright royal blue. Given that King kicked off his Red era, it seems appropriate that Queen of all songs would be where he started in a new artistic direction, though he would also keep the Red in quite a few videos going forward. Queen also heralded the release of another album, Kanaria Code. This album featured several of the songs that were included on King, plus his various single hits released since then, including Identity and An Unaware Drunk. This was all happening in the late summer of 2022. If you were a Vocaloid fan at the time, you were also probably at least a little bit of an anime fan, which means that you couldn't have missed the fall anime season of 2022 dominated by the first season of Chainsaw Man, which has several connections to the vocalsynth world. Obviously, Kenshi Yonezu's opening Kickback was the big star, but Mappa Animation made the very unusual choice to feature 12 different artists with 12 different ending songs for each episode. Kanaria's Cerebral Rendezvous served as the theme for episode 6, Kill Denji, and was part of a lineup that included vocalsynth artists like Pseudo, Toeboy, who publishes vocalsynth content under the name John, and the singer Eve. When speaking about the song in an article for Anime Freaks, Kanaria noted that his main concern when writing was how to capture the, quote, unique worldview presented by the story of Chainsaw Man, and said that he even surprised himself with the way he managed to fit the song into the project's overall themes. Getting to feature in a show as big as Chainsaw Man is a big deal no matter how you slice it, but Rendezvous was also significant for being Kanaria's debut as a singer. He's released plenty of Vocaloid content since, but his performance was not a one-off. He sang in his very next song, this time duetting with Hololive VTuber Hoshimachi Suisei for Requiem in April of 2023. It's worth mentioning that I am unbelievably out of the VTuber loop for someone who's as into vocalsynth as I am, but of all of the VTubers I learned more about in the process of looking into the Kanaria covers, Suisei is definitely one of the new favorites. She's got an incredible voice. And speaking of that voice, I also found a pretty funny clip that somebody had saved and subtitled from one of the Hololive streams with Suisei and another VTuber called Uchida Atsuko talking about Requiem. See, Kanaria has a pretty high voice for a male singer, while Suisei has a really big vocal range, so their voices can actually be pretty similar at times and blend together really well. So well, in fact, that by Suisei's own admission, she's mistaken Kanaria's performance for her own and confused who sings which parts of the song. Requiem also got an official release with Hatsune Miku, complete with another video featuring Miku instead of the spooky twin characters that are in the version with Suisei and Kanaria. And if you'll forgive me bringing up Project Sekai again, I just want to put something out into the universe. Leonid Requiem cover. Get on it, Colorful Palette. Kanaria's next song was another Miku number titled Demon Lord, released July 7th, 2023, after which he took a break from releasing new music for several months. He never fully retreated from the vocalsynth sphere, in part because some of those Project Sekai covers came out during this time and drummed up some buzz, but some breathing room was at this point well earned. I'll reiterate that Kanaria was catapulted into Vocaloid superstardom before he was even old enough to legally drink in Japan, and he generally has released music at a much quicker pace than would necessarily be expected from a new artist on a conventional record deal. I don't say this to suggest that there was any sort of, crazy burnout playing a role here, and even if there were, it's not something that he's talked about publicly. I just figure, yeah, good time to take a break. Kanaria's return came in the form of a new Gumi song called Deck on April 26, 2024. I wouldn't say it's starkly different from any of his other works, but it does incorporate some really interesting sound effects in a way that he hadn't tried before. There's lots of spooky whispers and the odd muted scream worked into the music. He also, frankly, topped NV Baby in terms of grammatically incoherent English lyrics, with I just very fall in love repeated several times throughout the song. I know it's pretty common for Japanese artists to just throw in English lines because it sounds cool, but the fact that it's Gumi's English voice bank makes it just that much funnier to hear it because she pronounces these mangled lines so perfectly. In July of that year, Kanaria released his contribution to the massive Hatsune Miku and Pokemon crossover collaboration, Project Voltage. His song Champion was the 20th and final release of the initial run of songs, though there have subsequently been some remixes and the beginning of a new series called Project Voltage High. Most of the songs have featured a particular Pokemon type, but Champion links back to a particular character, Cynthia, who debuted in 2006's Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. There's text in the video lifted directly from her game dialogue, along with further references in the lyrics. What's more, the video starts with an illustration of Cynthia that shifts into one of Miku in the same pose with a similar hairstyle. Champion is also an interesting experiment in style for him too. Though another proudly short Kanaria track, with barely over 2 minutes of music, he manages to fit in quite a lot of interesting rhythm breaks and tempo shifts, as well as a lot of sound effects that, if they aren't the exact same ones used in Pokemon battle sequences, sound impressively similar. Champion, which as of recording came out about 10 months ago, was Kanaria's last Vocaloid song. In the time since, he's shifted slightly to building up his own persona a little bit. In August of 2024, he debuted as a VTuber, with a character who somewhat resembles the twins depicted in Requiem. He portrays himself as quite androgynous, with long hair, red eyes, and a really gorgeous gothic-looking outfit. But he did confirm in his debut stream that he is in fact male. Like I said, he's got a pretty high voice, and in the previous songs that he'd sung, the videos depicted these feminine or androgynous characters. But there was actually an even crazier source of confusion on how he identified on top of that. Apparently, people had been impersonating him in Apex Legends, that popular online battle royale game, including at least one instance of someone getting catfished by a person pretending to be Kanaria. Now, I really hope that Kanaria had been planning to debut as a VTuber anyway, and this impersonation stuff just maybe sped up the timeline, but I have no way of knowing what kind of urgency there was behind his decision to make himself more present online. Vocalsynth and VTubing is great for people who want to have that kind of online presence without revealing too much of their identity, but I guess the fact that it's easier to impersonate an animated character than someone with a known face is a drawback because, people don't know how to act right. That said, the VTubing seems to be going really well for him. He's been doing fairly regular live streams, which are usually a mix of gaming, behind-the-scenes showcases of his music work, and just hanging out and chatting. I admittedly didn't look too closely into the streams, since not all of them have been translated, and I thought it was worth my time more to dig into the music, but I'll link to some of the more interesting clips that I found in the sources document for anybody who wants them. And getting back to the music, his princely VTuber character features in the video he released that same month as his debut. Never Fiction was a second collaboration with Hoshimachi Suisei, though this time there was no Miku version. It's a really chill, somewhat jazzy track, and another instance where I really wish that Kanaria had written it longer. It's barely over 2 minutes long, and again, where's the bridge, dude? Lucky for me, Kanaria kept up a similarly chill, jazzy vibe for his next track, Brain, which also happens to be a good 30 seconds longer than Never Fiction. Additionally, while Never Fiction followed Kanaria's usual video format of a still image cycling through minor variations, such as a character's eyes opening or a frown shifting to a smile, etc., Brain got a much more elaborately animated video, with Kanaria depicted walking and dancing amidst imagery focusing mainly on his character's intense red eyes. And though my timing would have been better if this episode had coincided with, say, a new song from him, Brain still strikes me as a pretty good place to end on. As much as I would love to see more vocalsynth stuff coming from Kanaria, Brain also feels very new and fresh in a way that gets me excited to see where he goes with this. And at the very least, I definitely won't complain if we get more animated music videos like Brain, or more music in that slightly more chilled out style. And besides the music, Kanaria is still keeping busy. His most recent livestream happened just a few days before I finished up the script, a nice casual chat that he hosted with a fellow vocalsynth creator, Hiragi Magnetite. And so, until that next song comes out, we'll just have to sit and wait to see what it is. I know Kanaria's birthday is shortly after I'll be releasing this episode, so I'll sign off with a happy early birthday to him, and best wishes to the rest of you. Thanks for taking the time to listen to something a whole lot longer than 2 minutes and 15 seconds of dance beats. Enjoying the show? You can help it reach more ears by leaving a review. Just a few words can be a huge boost for a smaller pod like this. And if you're really feeling generous, you can support the show directly over at patreon.com/happysynthesizers. For $2 a month, you'll get every episode a week ahead of the public. Besides that, you can find transcripts, sources, and the full suite of social media by way of linktree/happysynthesizers. Happy Synthesizers is written and produced by Kay Judson. The theme music is Eve and Polka, arranged with inspiration from Lloyd Tuma and Automania.